Testing. Okay. All right. I'd like to call to order the September 8th meeting of the EOTC. Clerk, please call the roll.
This is the meeting of the Sunshine Orange Task Force Education Outreach and Training Committee Force. Member David present. Member Winston. Winston absent. Member Wolf. Wolf absent. Member Wolf did inform me that he would not be able to attend today's meeting. Chair Hyland.
Present.
Hyland present. We have a quorum.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
On agenda changes, normally we have public comment towards the end. Was it your intention to start having that at the beginning, or did that just happen?
That just happened, but
Okay.
I'm willing to go with that since that's how the agenda was put out for
Okay. In the future,
today.
normally we just do it after.
Yeah,
action item.
we can discuss that. Yeah.
That's fine.
Item number 2, public comment. Members of the public may address the Education Outreach and Training Committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction but not on today's agenda. Is there any public comment on today? Today, there is no public comment. Item number 3, file number 13035, hearing on the status of the order of determination, complaint filed by James Chafee against the Board of Supervisors, Budget and Finance Committee for violating Sunshine Ordinance Section 67.15C and California Government Code Section 54954.3B for failing to provide adequate opportunity for public comment prior to taking final actions. May I suggest that Member Pilpil could provide a summary?
Some background.
Want me to do that? Okay. So we heard this matter, months ago, and found that at last year's June 2013 hearings on the budget at the Board of Supervisors at the Budget and Finance Committee, in the opinion of the task force, did not provide adequate and meaningful public comment opportunities during the consideration of the budget, particularly on the trailer legislation that was heard and acted on relative to the budget, but public comment was not taken at the same date and time as the items were being heard. So we found a violation. We had a hearing earlier this year, I forget when, I think April, and discussed the procedures going forward for this year's budget cycle. I recall putting out a memo with some suggested changes, which isn't in here, but Victor's going to look for that. And Ms. Stephanie from Supervisor Farrell's office indicated that some of those changes might be considered, but probably not all of them, and would report back at a subsequent meeting that was going to be August, but here we are in September to discuss how the procedures worked this year. And so I guess we'll hear about that. I believe subsequent to all of this, Mr. Pecorello, I believe, filed a complaint about this year's budget process, and we'll hear that on the merits at some point in the future. But that probably also relates to this issue, so I just wanted to mention that. That's my introduction, and we should probably hear from Ms. Stephanie and have some discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Member Pilpel. Ms. Stephanie?
Hi, yes, this is Catherine Stephanie, Legislative Aide to Supervisor Mark Farrell, who's the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee both last year and this year. I'd also like the record to reflect that complainant James Chafee is not present today. Also, that his complaint last year involved 2 items with regard to library fees. And this year, the library was heard separately from the full budget. So I can go through what we did differently this year to address some of the issues that were at issue with this task force. We printed out materials that said budget process, how to be heard, and that was provided to Mr. Pilpel after several attempts at he and I trying to make contact. These were available at the clerk's office and also on our budget website.
And this is in our package today?
Yes, I sent it to
Okay.
Page 2.
Mr. Young.
Okay.
So, with regard to the budget process and how to be heard, we compiled a simple and short list of suggestions on how to be informed and how to provide input to the city's budget for fiscal years 14-15 and 15-16. We notified people that in order to become informed about the details of the budget and the schedule of meetings, to visit the budget website, and computers are also available in the clerk's office if someone doesn't have access to a computer. On the left side hand of the page, we pointed out a series of very important links to budget documents and schedules. The department hearing schedule was on the budget website so that people knew when various departments would be presenting their budgets to the Budget and Finance Committee. On specifically providing input, at our May budget department hearings, we had public comment taken each day after the department presentations, not just on the one day that has been complained of in the past. In the May budget hearings, public comment was taken on airport, port, SFMTA, PUC, the library, and I mentioned the library because that was the reason why James Chafee's complaint originated last year. Also taken on child support services and retirement. June budget hearings, we took public comment on all departments on one day, as we have done in the past and have been told by the city attorney's office was within our right to do so, which again was in our response to the last complaint. That public comment day was on June 20th, beginning at 10 a.m. We worked with the clerk's office to provide a very smooth budget process, which many people did remark upon this year. One thing that we did differently this year, after listening to this task force and people feeling that they weren't being heard in a way that they wanted to, we provided a new link on our budget website so that all comments could be made part of the record and distributed to committee members. We received about 60 comments, ranging from, I printed out a few from parks, COLA, cost of living increase, to rec park budgeting. There was definitely, I would say, a variety of comments that went to all budget members, so we thought that was useful. That is the response that I have for you today, and I'm willing to take any questions, of course.
Okay. Thank you. So in front of the task force, any questions, members? I'll probably defer to Member Pilpel mostly on this. Member David?
Yeah, Ms. Stephanie, thank you. So once again, this year, I know the budget process went late into the evening, and a friend of mine who works at the food bank was here till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and she called me. She had a suggestion, and I thought it was an interesting idea, and I just kind of wanted to run it by and see if this might be something to be helpful. That actually giving people kind of like a deli counter, like tickets of like, you will be speaking between this time and this time. And so that, because she was like, I was hanging out in Supervisor Breed's office for like 6 hours because I had no idea what time I was going to be able to give my public.
I can speak to that.
Oh,
one.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I was the budget clerk when I tried that,
Yeah.
and it did not work.
Oh, okay.
People were passing off tickets to other people. They did not know what to do with the piece of paper, and then I had problems with cooperation with announcing which numbers and letters were coming in, and it was very bad.
Okay, well.
I have tried that.
Fair enough. Like I said, someone called it. I thought it was a decent suggestion. Apparently it's been tried, and it failed miserably.
Maybe something more formal like what they do at what is it? Motor vehicles, where they have the banner up there with the numbers that flick up. I mean, same idea.
All I was trying to think of that if there was a way to just make someone's time more predictable as to when they would be giving public comment, could be helpful. I don't know if there is a a wait to do that.
We did have people line up, and they were escorted into the chambers and were called up, or basically the clerk's office led them up to speak as they had lined up. Obviously, there's no perfect to this. Everybody's going to have a different complaint. We tried to take people with disabilities first. Also, we started at 10 a.m. Promptly, and I believe it was promptly, it could be a few minutes after. We did not take a lunch break, and we went right through. We did not go to 2 o'clock in the morning. I believe we ended before the close of business at 5. So I really felt like, and I heard from a lot of people, including the clerk's office and other people and advocates, that this was one of the smoothest public comments day they've ever seen. So,
Ms. Stephanie, just to answer your statement about Mr. Chafee not being here, he's not required to be here.
that's fine. I was just letting the record reflect.
Right. And in fact, he addressed that in a letter to us in February. Popo?
So we could have a long discussion, and we have had discussions about meaningful public comment and public involvement in the budget process. I think as specifically relates to this complaint, this hearing, this task force, this committee, the complaint was about public comment on trailer legislation being heard during that one long day of general public comment on the budget. And I recall in the last hearing that the two suggestions that I had that I thought would be the most meaningful were to take public comment on the trailer legislation on the day that it's calendared to be heard and not on a separate day. And in addition, actually two other things, to take comments on individual departments the day that they're heard while the department head is still there and the budget analyst, so everyone who's relevant to that department. And finally, when the add-backs list is made available, to have an opportunity for public comment at that time, whether it's 4 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning, whatever the process yields, so that there's an opportunity to review that list and give public comment, because it doesn't exist usually prior to 2, 3 in the morning. So those three suggestions, I'd like to hear whether they were implemented. It sounds like they were not, and those would be my thoughts about a meaningful response to this complaint, to change the procedures to make the public comment again more meaningful.
First of all, with regard to the first one, when you say trailer legislation, what specifically are you referring to? No action was taken on any specific piece of legislation, which is usually what was referred to in James Chafee's complaint was the fee legislation,
right.
The legislation that goes with the budget. No action was taken on those items until public comment was heard.
Right.
So there was no amendments or anything to that legislation that would have sparked new reasons for public comment. So I would have to disagree with you on that first.
Okay, so to be clear, the budget and there are usually two pieces of legislation relative to the budget: the annual budget and appropriation ordinance and the annual salary ordinance.
Correct.
That's kind of the legislative vehicle by which the budget is adopted. There's usually separate legislation, usually 20 or 30 different pieces to change fees, funds, expend fund balances, modify rec park fees, all kinds of things. It's that trailer legislation that's usually scheduled for the day that a particular department is heard. But what happened last year and what gave rise to the complaint is that public comment was not taken on that day. All of that public comment was held to the same public comment opportunity on that Friday for 2 minutes per speaker, and it could be at 10 o'clock or it could be at 5, but it was on everything related to the budget and the trailer legislation, and it did not allow an opportunity for someone to speak for up to 2 or 3 minutes on trailer legislation to change departmental fees or other things.
Well, with regard to this year's, I wouldn't call it trailer legislation. I would call it legislation to support the budget. There was much less than there was last year, and I believe maybe 4 pieces of legislation increased fees, and I think those were like state mandated. I mean, we looked at the pieces of legislation. You and I can review it if you'd like. And the library, which was the genesis of this entire complaint, there was public comment taken on library legislation on fees that day when they were at the May department budget hearings. So there wasn't that much. And in June, no, there wasn't enough. There was no reason to have that done at that time, and we saw no reason to do that this year.
Okay, well, from my perspective, part of what gave rise to the task force finding a violation is that this is handled differently from other legislation at the board. So normally if there's a hearing on appointments to the task force or a grand jury report or accepting a grant for money at the airport, each individual item, when it's called at committee, there's an opportunity for public comment. And to treat this legislation differently and say, okay, well, you're here, on a Wednesday morning to hear the legislation, but we're not going to take public comment today. You have to wait until Friday or a week from Friday, and then we'll hear the public comment along with 500 other people about everything under the sun. And then when we come back to this, a week or two later, maybe we'll have remembered what you said. That doesn't seem like meaningful public comment.
It's not separate legislation. It's legislation that's part of the budget. It's not separate legislation. It's legislation that has to be, it's in the budget, and then that legislation is needed to change whatever supports the budget. So it's not like it's a different piece of legislation than the budget that's being presented.
Well, actually it is. Amending the admin code or the park code or the health code to change a fee or it is separate legislation. That's why it's called trailer legislation. It may implement a policy that's reflected in the budget, but it really is separate legislation. It's a separate ordinance. It's separately enacted, voted on, all of that.
But when the budget is presented, that fee increase or whatever that somebody may have a problem with is in the budget. It's taken account as if it has been passed. So if you have a problem with the legislation supporting the budget, you can talk on both pieces at the same time because you have a problem with the budget because the fee is already included in the budget. They budget based on those fee increases, and there weren't that many this year at all.
I think what Member Pilpel is trying to say is to not have that comment at that time is disingenuous to the public.
I understand what he's trying to say, and I'm trying to explain that. Right.
Well, this budget is a different animal than your standard, committee hearings and whatnot. This is such a large and long-lasting animal, if you like, that it might be worth keeping an open mind and considering maybe slightly different, more open, even more accommodating procedures. And I think that's what Member Pilpel is getting towards. So, I consider this case a work in progress, and we'd like to see more. I think what you've done this year is great, but there are some bits and pieces here that can still be parsed out and I think made more efficient and allow more sunshine.
Right. And it is one of the reasons why we did open up the link for the comment on the budget.
And I think all those, I was going to say all those, the hyperlinks are fantastic because that really should allow most people, Member Pilpel accepted perhaps, from going in and finding that information. I'm going to let Member Pilpel continue leading on this and perhaps open to any other suggestions or discussions amongst the group as to how to carry on this conversation, which I think is a valuable one. I'd also like to take public comment at some point from Mr. Piccarello, who I think has some interesting things on this.
Absolutely, I agree, and I would also like to hear from Mr. Piccarello. In the past, the budget process has been based more on whether the city had a large deficit that was trying to close, and there were labor negotiations and tax measures and other things in flux. But the budget process in general should be about setting policy, and it really is the major policy document that works through this building every year. And so when there are recommendations from the budget analyst to decrease a line item or not approve a position that's not properly justified. Those discussions happen between the budget analysts, the members of the board, and the departments, but the public usually is kind of left out of the equation. And all that just results in a $20 to $30 million pot that's usually put together during the budget process that's reallocated to the ad backs. And that's usually the way this sort of game has evolved over the years. But it doesn't really allow people to talk about the level of services at a department or the amount of staffing or the level of fees and deferred maintenance and, just a variety of policy issues that affect individual departments and ultimately affect the services that the city provides and how business is done. So the more we can change that to be a more engaged public dialogue within the law, I think the better. And so, that's why I'm particularly keen on this, as it were.
But I'd just like to add one thing to that, because it is a major public policy document. And I've been the legislative aide staffing Supervisor Mark Farrell on this for the past 2 years. And the opportunity for public comment just doesn't come at public comment. We take hundreds of meetings with advocates and members of the public, and we're out in the committee, and we have an online town hall, and we have coffees with people. We are not just ignoring the public while making decisions around a major policy document that's going to affect the fiscal finances of the city of county of San Francisco for the next 2 years. So I just don't want anyone having the impression that the public is not being heard just because on one day we take public comment on the budget for June public hearings. So it's not like the public isn't being heard.
I think that's a fair statement. I'm thinking perhaps, Member Pilpel, if you continue to communicate with Ms. Stephanie, and maybe notate those 3 items that you referenced, that might be a good sort of continuation.
Sure.
And maybe at this point we can take some public comment on the matter.
Thomas Piccarello. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me public comment. Mr. Pipel is correct. This year I filed a serious complaint against the Budget and Finance Committee because I found that they did not comply with the previous order of determination. And if you heard Supervisor Farrell's aide, she told you basically that tradition and the city attorney advised them they didn't have to comply with the order of determination. My concern with the Budget and Finance public comment process is the bundling of all the city departments. They'll put 40 departments together on the one day and give you 2 minutes to discuss the 40 departments. That is not sufficient public comment, either under California or the Sunshine Ordinance laws. So I think you need to have Budget and Finance Committee make a commitment that they're going to comply with the previous order of determination. There was some mention about proposals going from Supervisor Farrell's office to Mr. Pipel. I haven't seen any documents or any specific proposals in writing. What I heard was that tradition that's at City Hall was to allow members of the public 2 minutes to discuss 60, 70 city departments and $8 billion, and we're going to continue to do that. I think you ought to advise them otherwise and have them comply with the order of determination. Again, the public is not being allowed to discuss each city department budget by budget. Yeah, it's going to take longer, but quite frankly, despite what you were advised about advocates praising the public comment this year, They scheduled and rescheduled so many budget and finance department hearings. It was like whack-a-mole. You couldn't find out when they were going to meet. They had it scheduled for a Tuesday, then they met on Wednesday. In fact, the final day of public comment, half their stakeholders did not know they were going to meet. They met one day early. They were most of the advocates' stakeholders were expecting public comment, final public comment, or at least to listen to the discussion the following day. They met one day early, and they put it all together. Bottom line, Budget and Finance Committee would rather hear Walter sing to them than hear substantive public comment regarding the budget. But the Sunshine Ordinance compels otherwise, and you need to get a commitment from Supervisor Farrell and the rest of the Budget and Finance members how they're going to comply with the order of determination. Thank you.
Suggestions?
I agree with, pretty much all of that. I understand, and none of this is to be taken against Ms. Stephanie, who I have highest regard for and I think does a fine job. I just think that it's not just neighborhood coffees and, mayor's town hall meetings and email public comment. It's also about people paying attention and being able to respond as new information becomes available and to have the opportunity for public comment. In a lot of ways, the budget analyst and department heads have more access to the process and can negotiate and get what they want, and the public is considered somewhat irrelevant to the process, and it's just a thing that I think. As much as we provide city services, we don't do a great job in engaging this thing, and that's just my feeling about it. So if your inclination following discussion is to continue this again, I can certainly memorialize some of these comments, and we can continue to have further discussions, maybe seek to change the process more for next year. That would be nice.
Yeah.
But, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Member David?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think if we can figure out a way to make it more accessible to the public, I'm all for that. But at the bottom line is that if the public feels that they are not being well served by this process, they have the power of the ballot, and they could vote out people who they feel are not giving enough access. And so, I'm all for trying to come up with, ways that the public can be more engaged and all that. I don't think I was, one of the people who found a problem with this at the beginning. And, I think Member Pippel is very smart and creative, and I'm fully confident that he will have some ideas for the Budget Committee. But, this is a long and tedious process, and it is something that, in my personal experience, they do go out into the communities and do talk to lots of different people, and that the public comment is not just or I should say that there's many, many ways of engaging the public, and it's not just the public comment. So, I feel like this has been discussed. I hope that Mr. Pilpel will continue his conversation with Ms. Stephanie, and, perhaps we can come up with some suggestions, but I'm not sure that there's much more need for, that much more discussion today.
Thank you, Member David. Yeah, I, not being as well versed with dealings at City Hall as many people in this room, I am sensing a feeling from the Budget and Finance Committee that their dealings are exempt from public comment and scrutiny, and that is something that is exactly within our charter to try and work against that. And I think I'd like Member Pilpel to continue to work with Ms. Stephanie. I'd be very interested to see Mr. Piccarello's complaint, and I think this is perhaps the most important thing that Sunshine will do, is to slowly just kind of unentangle this beast that happens every year, and perhaps one of the most important things that eventually we will be able to shine more light into. So I think on that note, if you could put some of those in a memo and continue this matter, I think that's the way to go. Do we need a vote on that?
We'd like to continue this to the call of the chair, or
Yes, please.
we'd need a motion to continue to the call of the chair.
So moved.
Second?
Without objection.
Is there any other instructions besides the continuation to the call?
Member Pilpel?
I've taken note to try to memorialize my comments. I'll try to have further conversations with Ms. Stephanie. I mean, just to conclude, I've followed the budget process around here for close to 30 years, and it has varied over the years depending on the people involved, quite frankly, and the amount of money and that sort of thing. So there are times when it's, as Member David suggested, when, different members of the board had different interests, right? But I don't think that it should be, I don't think this public involvement process should really be determined by who's on the board at the time. I think it should be about meaningful public involvement, which is not like, an hour public comment per person on each item. It needs to be reasonable, but I think if we can't, within this room and with a couple of other folks, come up with a reasonable process, there may be others who are not happy with the process that would amend the ordinance or try to amend the charter in some way that is less workable. And I don't think that's a good outcome either. So I think if we can just get some heads together on this, the tweaks that I think we're talking about are not massive changes. So let's continue to work on that.
Great. And then anything you do, send through Victor. So
Absolutely. It'll be in the file,
Great.
and we'll talk about it. That's right.
So without objection?
The motion to continue the call passes without objection.
Thank you, Ms. Stephanie.
Item number 4, file number 14043, hearing on the status of the order of determination, complaint filed by Mr. Kokoros against Deputy Chief Lynn Tamioko, San Francisco Police Department, for violating Sunshine Ordinance Section 67.24G and 67.27D for failing to provide the requester an explanation of the nature of the exempt information and suggest alternative sources for information. Pursuant to the order of the determination, is requested that Deputy Chief Tamioko, San Francisco Police Department, appear before the Education Outreach and Training Committee to discuss the police department's policy regarding public access to police incident reports and policy regarding the content of responses provided to the public when records are withheld. In addition to that, the task force did ask that Deputy City Attorney Cola provide additional information regarding applicable laws and policies pertaining to the withholdings of public records by protective agencies and how various protective agencies interpret them. Mr. Cola did inform me that he did do a search concerning this, and he did not find any relevant case law on this matter.
And I think we misspelled Tamioka on the agenda, and
It's okay.
I will
very
correct
important.
Okay. Yep. Yes, welcome.
Thank you
for
very
coming.
much.
The complainant's here, too.
And the complainant is also here? Ms. Kokolas? Yes. All right.
I don't believe I violated the Sunshine Ordinance policy. I did respond at the request of the city attorney to Mr. Kokolas's request for information. We do have a unit within the police department that at that time was not available to respond to the request for some of the police reports. And so I did respond with one report that Mr. Kokolas asked for.
That wasn't the one requested.
Excuse me.
Sir, you'll have a chance to talk.
And there was 2 police report or case numbers in his request. One of them was a confidential report that I could not release. The other one I was able to release to him. My concern from the letter that I was given was that he had no police reports sent to him, and so I did respond. I do understand that I didn't quote the content of the code that I did quote, and I do know that Ms. Brasida who is the current Public Record Act request respondent in the response in the police department. So I think we've already corrected that. So.
Okay, thank you. Members of the task force?
Do we want to hear from the complainant first before discussing?
Sure. Okay. Ms. Krukolis, you have up to 5 minutes to bring us up to speed on what you've received.
Yes, the requested document was a confidential report, as I was told. However, on it, it says that I can obtain that information if I were a member of the press or if I were an attorney. As a private individual, I have no access to it, even though the report was false. I also requested from the police legal 3 different reports. I had requested the report ending in 101, the report ending in 386, and the report ending in 370. Assistant Chief Tamioka sent me report ending in 101, which is the report that I had filed claiming that 2 previous reports were false and I would like them to be investigated. Nothing happened. And then I'm sent report 101, which is the report that I filed, and it is redacted. This is adding insult to injury. I mean, and there's no mention whatsoever about report 370. In the letter that I had requested, report 386, I had made mention of both the ones 101 and 370. Why is it that I was sent 101 and not 370? I did not request 101 or 370. I had just mentioned in the letter that they were requested. I also requested a completion of the reports 386 and 370 from the domestic violence unit, that there was no action taken against me. I was not prosecuted. There was no foundation for these allegations. They were investigated by Sergeant Kruger of the domestic violence unit. And very simply, my problem is that I'm at this point on a U visa. I cannot afford to have any false reports hanging over my head when I go see the immigration in a couple of years and worry about my status. So that is the reason that I've been requesting that report. And the thing is, the San Francisco Police Department is discriminating based on income. If I could afford to have an attorney, I would have had no problems. That's basically what is being said on the report that was refused. And that's all I have to say. I would appreciate getting the report. As Assistant Chief said, Ms. Bruseda did send me a less redacted copy of the emergency protective order. And my question remains, if the allegations were actually true, why was I not prosecuted? Why did they not take it to obtain an actual restraining order? The emergency protective order is good for 7 days, so these people can go ahead and do that. The other problem is that the police department has no venue for somebody that has been falsely accused of something to react to it. There is no way for me to respond to this, even though it was a false police report. The police department is protecting its own. I understand the policy that they don't want people not to file reports for domestic violence, but at the same time, once they're proven wrong, I would like the opportunity to do something about it and to respond to it accordingly, instead of being shut down and the police department just ignoring my problem. And that's all I have to say. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Before the body, Member Pilbaugh.
So let me start with Mr. Koulis.
Yes.
Very good. I love your accent. You should just keep talking.
Must be the Greek in me.
Yeah. So you referenced the 3 police incident or report numbers.
Correct.
Have you gotten all 3 of them?
No,
2 of them?
I have not received 386.
Okay.
The only thing that I received from 386 was the emergency protective order that the first time was sent to me.
That's fine. Don't.
Okay.
The other 2 you got, and you're good with those?
370 I got through subterfuge. It was not mailed to me.
Whatever. You've got it?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And the third one you've got?
The 386 I do not have. No. This is
Okay,
the one
the
that I
386
want.
is the one that you do not have.
Yes.
And that's what you would still like, either a redacted version or an unredacted, but something.
Yes, and
Okay.
also I would like what they have at the end of every investigation. The police department closes the case, and there is a report, or it looks like the first page of a police report, but it says, no action is taken, or
Some kind of cover sheet.
right.
Okay.
And this is what I would love to have.
On 386?
On 386 and
Okay.
370 for that matter, but on 386 I would appreciate that, yes.
Let's see what we can do. All right, thank you. So,
you.
to Deputy Chief Tomioka, 2 or 3 things. So first, on the instant requests, can you tell us, is there any way, in your opinion, that Mr. Krikolis can get this incident ending in 386, either in a redacted or unredacted version, or the cover sheet, the disposition? Is there anything else that we can do for him on 386?
Not that I know of, because it's a domestic violence report, and the person that filed that report requested confidentiality. I
So-
can look into see if the case is completely closed, and I do believe it is, but I am unclear.
When a case closes, does that change his status?
In other types of crimes, it does, but with the domestic violence and the domestic violence laws and the reporting laws,
Maybe
I'm
not.
not positive
Okay.
if it can ever be released.
If the victim, or whatever you call it, requests confidentiality, is that confidentiality as to their identity, or confidentiality as to the entire report and the circumstances and the whole enchilada?
Everything is my understanding, because the domestic violence advocates, I think, fought very hard to make sure that the confidentiality continued on, because oftentimes there's multiple, and I'm not suggesting that this is an ongoing situation, but oftentimes in domestic violence, they are crimes that continue and they're unreported. So we encourage domestic violence victims to come forward, and they have that security that those reports are not going to be made public.
So I guess what we're dealing with here is that concept of victims having rights and not wanting to breach all of that with the alleged perpetrator, I guess, in this case, if that person is cleared, or whether or not that person is cleared, to have access to the allegation or some information about it, so that that person can deal with it appropriately.
Yes.
And so there's a balance, if
There
you will.
is.
So I guess one of the things that we probably need you to do is to check with whoever you need to check with about whether any of this information can be released, even in a redacted form, so it doesn't identify the particulars or the alleged whatever, but gives the complainant here something.
Okay.
And if there is a discharge note or a cover sheet or something there.
Okay.
I wanted to follow up with some other things about police procedures on incident reports, but I think others had some comments on Mr. Korkolis' particular thing.
Well, I was just curious that, so if the case is closed, let's just assume it is, like we think it is, does the person who was at one time alleged of whatever it is, like, how are they informed of the fact that the case is no longer ongoing?
Well, the inspector in the case would notify all parties involved, so that Mr. Kokola should have been notified.
But via writing, or?
Normally phone call or in person.
So, I mean, is it possible to get something in writing? I mean, it sounds like that's, at the end of the day, what he wants is that to show in writing that
His case is closed?
the case is closed. Is that possible to do?
if we could do it for this individual, I mean, I can't change policy to do it for every crime victim, but in Mr. Kokola's case...
Well, he's not a crime victim, right? I mean, let's be clear, right? He was accused.
Well, he said that he was falsely accused.
Falsely accused. Right, I'm saying, but just going through right, someone filed a complaint, it was investigated, and then the investigation was closed. Right? I mean, I'm not getting into the facts of, but that's just right. Someone filed a complaint, the complaint was investigated, and the investigation was closed. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And there's nothing in writing that says those three things?
No.
Okay.
That's very interesting. And I'm not a Sixth Amendment lawyer, but that's a very worrying policy.
Well, there's something in the case file that the case is closed, but we don't write to the reportee.
You just mentioned that you notify all parties that the case is closed.
Yes, we do.
And
But
to not do that by writing is, I'm sorry, we're in the 21st century now. I find that very hard to believe. And if that is the case, that might be something worth, looking into either by us or by you. But that doesn't sit very well with me.
Okay. I mean, I certainly can look into the way we do things.
Because that would really just solve this issue. I mean, part of it, and I'd be curious to see if I think Member Winston might have some experience in this area as far as what documents are not available, since he's a journalist.
Chief Tomioka, when a suspect in a homicide case is, or rather when a homicide case is either charged or not charged, what sort of note is left in that file regarding the disposition of that case? Or an assault case, what sort of note is made in that file?
In a homicide case?
Homicide, assault, robbery, and a felony case.
In the inspector's chronological, they will put what their final disposition is in the case file as part of the chronological report.
Does that hold true with domestic violence instances?
Yes, it does.
Would there be a way to release the chron redacted for Mr. Kokola's records, considering he's on a U visa, which is actually a visa for crime victims? And I can understand his need to have a cleared criminal record if he's here in this country on that visa and on a condition that he does not commit criminal offenses.
No, we don't release the chronological.
Are you sure about that? I've seen chronological reports released otherwise. In fact, I actually obtained chronological reports through the Public Records Act from the San Francisco Police Department.
I don't believe that in any case.
Hold on.
Sir,
We'll get back to you.
You cannot talk out in public. If you do that again, you're going to have to wait outside, and then we'll call you in to talk. So,
I mean, I never released a chronological.
I've
in a
received
case
chronological
file.
reports from your department, from other Bay Area police departments, and other California police departments. So what you're telling me isn't consistent with the way that the law is practiced around the state.
Okay, I will look into that.
Redacted and unredacted.
Redacted. I'm asking about redacted chronological reports, because this is information. I understand that there's absolutely information in a criminal investigative file that cannot be released to the public, that needs to be kept confidential for whatever reasons, because of the identity of informants and so on. But if this is an individual who's here in this country on a visa, which A is for crime victims, and B is conditional on the fact that he needs to stay out of trouble with the law, it seems like there is, it just seems like there is a middle ground that can be reached between providing him with all the information and just withholding the law and hiding behind 6254, which is a problem with law enforcement in this state.
Okay. But I think we can provide him with the letter that says that the case is closed and there was no further action related to him.
And maybe a date on that? Maybe a date to indicate when that history action happened? Something?
Yes.
Okay. So from my perspective, I don't think we're trying to change major overarching police policies today. That would be fun, but it might take a little while. It did occur to me in looking at the attachment that the Department General Order on release of police reports is now 20 years old, and we should have a little party. And this was written just after the Sunshine Ordinance was passed. Presumably there have been some other changes to law and policy in the last 20 years. It's also a little vague in some areas about who does what says that the general public may request in writing the release of a report during normal business hours, 0800 to 1600 hours, Monday through Friday, holidays excluded, or through the mail. But doesn't say anything about fax or email or in person. It like all department general orders, it needs a periodic revision. And furthermore, it seems like in this case, there are some particulars about either a domestic violence case in general or a closed investigation that aren't clearly explained how to deal with them. How, if this case hadn't come up, maybe you don't have a policy or practice for issuing a letter indicating that the person is clear on that particular incident. Maybe that would be a good thing to look at.
And that was the second point of the order determination, not providing alternative means,
right?
If I may remember correctly.
Yeah. So I think we're having a good discussion here about both police procedures and how they intersect with public record laws. And I agree that 6254 is not great and is abused likely throughout the state. At the same time, we want to allow the police to investigate and do the things that you need to do. It's another balancing situation. But I think we have to have some better policies and procedures in place because we've had several instances involving police reports and incidents where people aren't clear about how to get reports and they get sent from legal to records back to legal and they say, oh, you have to sign something for this. And they're like, well, it's the whole process needs to be better explicated. Let me go to Member David.
Yeah, actually, I would like to ask Mr. Kukulis to come up. Just have a quick question for you. If you were to receive a letter from the San Francisco Police Department that said that the case has been closed, no charges have been filed, and with a date on it, would you be satisfied?
I would be more than happy with it. The problem is, I received a closing statement from investigator Sergeant Randy Lee regarding my report 101 that says that the case was investigated. No charges will be filed against the other two parties for filing a false police report under 148.5 because
841.5.
148.5, filing a false police report.
Sorry.
Okay?
That's the other. Okay.
However, as I was told by Sergeant Lee, there is no such thing as a false police report because false police reports are hearsay. And up until they're improperly investigated.
Okay, so I just want to stop you right there. We are not here to have a debate about whether the police are, whether there's a false police report or not. We're here to get you public documents that you need.
Yes.
If you're not happy with the way that the police are handling a situation,
that's a different story.
That's not our mandate.
I understand
Okay.
that.
So my question is that for public record, as far as would you be satisfied if you received a letter that said that the case has been investigated, no charges it's closed?
I would be very happy with that because...
Remember, David, let me take over.
Like
Just to be very specific, you already have a letter for 101. You're happy with that?
That is correct.
You have a letter for 370?
No.
Okay, and you don't have a letter for 386?
No.
So,
And 386, I would also like to know what I was accused of.
okay, so those are the two documents that you would like?
Yes.
Okay. Deputy Chief?
I'm sorry, Chair. More than that, not you want those documents to know what you're accused of, but you also want a document that says that case is closed.
That is correct. And
I just want to be.
Like I said, report 101, I was given.
We're not discussing 101. 101's done.
No, but I'm saying, because Assistant Chief Tamioka said that there's no such thing in writing. They do have a form at the end of the report that says case closed. They have the name of the Assistant District Attorney on it. As a matter of fact, in my case, it was Assistant District Attorney Fong that says will not prosecute the case because of insufficient evidence or what have you. But there is also the same type of cover on report 386 and 370.
Okay.
I would be more than happy to receive those two.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I'm almost done. Ms.
Detective Chief?
Tamioka?
Yes, go ahead.
So on page 4 of this DGO 3.16, sub 2, after the case is closed. There's a whole section here on when the prospect of enforcement action has been terminated. The Sunshine Ordinance requires complete disclosure except the following items may be withheld. Do you know if the request was processed at the time under that section, or if the circumstances have changed since, so more information might be available?
I don't know, but I
Okay.
will check in the
Okay.
morning.
And just finally, one of the reasons that we found a violation here, on page 103 of our packet, there was a letter dated March 13th of this year from Maureen Conifrey, who I understand is no longer with the police, that cited 6255 as one of the bases for non-disclosure. And the ordinance provides that the city can't assert 6255 as one of the bases for non-disclosure. So I just wanted, and maybe I'm speaking to Ms. Is it Panuelos? Okay. To be sure that we're not just her, but anyone else in the department is not asserting 6255 or any similar balancing test generally on a records disclosure issue.
I will make sure that they're aware of it.
That would be good.
And Deputy Chief, I think I see, is it Lieutenant Woon in the room? Is he someone you would need to consult with to release this information?
Well, I wanted him here to take notes because I figured
Okay.
that you were going to be giving us some direction
Okay.
that we might.
I mean, I'd like to cut to the chase, and if he has anything he'd like to add, and I'd rather hear it now rather than get a letter 2 weeks later saying that actually we can't release this information because X, Y, and Z. So if he has any thoughts, I would invite him up to the microphone at this point.
I'm fine.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Chair Hyland, I was going to suggest that we take public comment and continue this to the call of the chair.
That sounds like a good idea at this point. Public comment on this issue, this topic?
Thomas Piccarello, thank you. First, I want to thank already. I want to thank the Deputy Chief for appearing today. It's always a good sign when somebody that high up on the food chain appears in front of the task force. It shows at least she has an interest, and specifically because you have no subpoena power, she came here on her own, and that's a good thing. So I want to thank her for that. But when you look at the general order that they have regarding release of police reports, I'm troubled by on the procedures regarding how a record is determined whether to be released or not. It sets up a balancing test, but who determines that? Is that something that goes to the city attorney to balance the interest, or does it go to the police chief? Who makes those determinations regarding reports that can be released? So that's my concern. And then I guess 9 to 12 on page 2 of the document that was on your table, and attached to the letter dated September 2nd. Those appear never to be disclosed, but I don't believe that the complainant's request is addressed from item 9, 10, 11, or 12. I hope I'm making sense and you're following what I'm saying. And finally, your order of determination, did find that there was a specific document that was disclosable and hasn't been disclosed. So I think you need to revisit that. You're at a disadvantage today because you have no attorney sitting on your task force committee, or nor do you have the deputy city attorney. So you might want to consider getting one of the two attorneys on this committee. That might be helpful when there's an issue that appears to be, a legal issue, and perhaps they can give some guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment? Seeing none, public comments closed. Do you have a motion to continue?
Yeah. Can I just make one comment before I make that? I just want to be very, very clear that, and I think that we have been, that when it comes to domestic violence specifically, we fully expect, and redact, we fully expect the protection of the person who was filing that complaint. And so we're not, in no way are we saying that that name should ever not be redacted. I just want to be very, very clear that I don't think any of us are saying that at all. So that being said, I make a motion to continue this to the call of the chair, and I hope that we hear back from the police, I'd like to thank the police for their time, for coming, and that hopefully Mr. Kukulis can get the paperwork that he's looking for.
Yeah, I think we should spell out maybe more precisely.
Yes, the motion is to continue the matter to the call of the chair with the agreement that the police department will provide written verification that case has been closed, or a closing letter for cases ending in 370 and 386.
Is there a second?
I'll second. And I would just add,
Go ahead.
if there are any other documents, if the underlying incident report can be released in a redacted fashion, any of the information, that would be good too. So let's do whatever we can for Mr. Kukulis and close that matter. But I think we should also have a further conversation with Deputy Chief Tomioka, Lieutenant Woon, perhaps others, about police procedures generally and how incident reports are handled and all of that. We've started to do that a little bit over the past few months, but I don't think we've done that in a systematic and organized fashion. I think we would all benefit. We can talk about general orders. We can talk about what's on the website, procedures, all of that. Whether you're a journalist, a member of the public, whoever, people need access to certain information, and it's just very foggy about how that all happens.
Yeah, thank you, Member Patel. That addresses the second part of the original order determination. I'd like to take a roll call on this just to get it memorialized.
On the motion to continue the call of chair, Member David.
Aye.
David, aye. Member Highland.
Aye.
Highland, aye. Sorry, I have a few of them out of order.
That's
out of order.
Start over.
Yes, sorry.
Before you
I was
do
looking
that-
on the wrong side.
Before we do that, do we need public comment since we have a motion?
My understanding is you do not.
Okay.
We have public comment on that.
All right.
Member Pilpil.
Yes.
Pilpil, aye. Member David.
Aye.
David, aye. Member Winston.
Aye.
Winston, aye. Member Chair Highland.
Aye.
Highland, aye. The motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you again, Deputy Chief and members of the police force. Mr. Kukulis, thank you.
I'm not sure that you need to send us a copy of the letter, but maybe a copy of a letter saying that you sent something to Mr. Kukulis would be helpful for the file.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And just to note, upon receipt, if you are satisfied with what you receive, you may withdraw the remainder of this complaint. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Item number 5, adoption of the May 12, 2014 and July 14, 2014 meeting minutes.
I had some minor corrections. I don't want to do them now, but I'm happy to provide them to Victor.
Okay. Sounds good.
Is there any public comment on this item?
I didn't hear Mr. Pipel. What are you going to do with the minutes?
Member Pelpel is making some clerical corrections, and he will provide them to myself for inclusion into the minutes. So the motion is to continue, is to adopt the minutes as amended, pending Member Pelpel's clerical corrections.
You're going to adopt the minutes pending his corrections? It's hard to comment on that. I don't know what corrections he's going to make, so I'll pass. Thanks.
I think maybe what we should say is we're going to continue to them, or I think we need to document those changes.
We can do it that way and continue.
Yeah, I mean, if they're small and short enough, we can hear them now and then pass them as amended, or if they're more substantive, which it looks like they are, or these are
No, these
other
are
notes.
notes on today's.
Okay.
No, I haven't done them yet, but I will do them. There were just a couple of things
I see.
that
Okay.
needed a little more work.
Okay, I think we'll continue that then.
Okay. The motion is to continue the matter to the call of the chair. Is there a mover?
I move the motion.
Second.
Without objection?
Without objection.
Without objection.
The motion passes. Item number 6, announcements, comments, questions, and future agenda items.
Members?
So 2 quick things. Today's meeting was at 4. Our previous schedule was at 3.
Good point.
We should discuss that at the next meeting.
We can discuss it now, can't we?
We can talk about it a little bit, but we can't make a final decision about it.
Okay. I like the idea of 4 o'clock. I think it helps some of the newer members to get here, even though we're missing Member Wolf. I don't see making it 3 ever.
It will.
4 is a possibility. I think 4 helps you.
3 would kill me.
Okay.
Especially getting over from the East Bay.
Okay.
I mean, transit is not.
All right. And I think another thing is all the other subcommittee meetings are at 4, so some consistency. No bad idea. How do you feel?
4 o'clock is probably preferable to me, too. Yes.
Okay. So do we need to get this on the agenda for next time?
We should put it on as a change to the regular meeting time.
Okay, just to notice the public.
I don't think we need to change the meeting schedule. We can still list it as monthly, even if we're not going to meet every month for the moment because of the whatever.
Yeah.
But if we're going to do 4 o'clock, then we should change that. The balance that we struck in the past was that city people wanted to be out by 5, and we wanted to try to not incur a lot of overtime for Victor.
Okay.
At the same time, the public wasn't always available before 5. So
right.
anyway, there's that. And the other thing is I provided a list, I think, at the last meeting of agenda items that I had in the queue. I'm happy to talk with you online or offline, or if we want more of a discussion, because I think there was really a large basket of things that we were going to try to do.
Okay.
So that's up to you now.
Okay. In fact, I was going to ask Victor if he had any thoughts on, I mean, we have 2 months to the next meeting, but is there anything that...
Discussion concerning final recommendations in civil grand jury is going to be necessary eventually. Since the majority of our responses was pending further review, we do need to develop that further review to provide to the committee within 6 months.
They're going to hold us to the 6 months, is what I'm hearing.
I'm not sure what the government audits committee will be rescheduling, but we do state in our report that we will respond within 6 months or provide further analysis within 6.
Okay. All right. Okay. Seeing nothing else? Next item?
Item number 7, is there any public comment on items?
Any public comment on item 6?
Oh, and actually, it occurs to me for the November meeting, if we're not meeting in October, November would normally fall on the second Monday, which would be Veterans Day, I believe. So we should figure out how to reschedule that.
Okay. Good question.
Possible reschedule of the November meeting.
I'm done.
Actually,
Next on the agenda is item number 7, adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys. See you guys.
Thank you.